The cargo ship Dauntless Pioneer moved through the dark waters of the Pacific Ocean like a giant metal whale. Its hull cut through the waves with steady power while its engines hummed deep inside the ship. Captain Kim Woo-jin stood on the bridge and watched the endless ocean stretch out before him. The sun was setting behind them, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Kim had been sailing the oceans for 23 years. He had seen storms that could sink smaller ships and waves that reached up to the sky. But today felt different. The air was too still and the water was too calm. It reminded him of the stories his grandfather used to tell about the great typhoons that hit Korea when he was young. "Captain, we have the latest weather report," said First Officer Park Sang-ho as he walked onto the bridge. Park was a tall man with serious eyes who had sailed with Kim for 5 years. He carried a tablet in his hands, and his face showed worry. Kim turned away from the window and took the tablet. The numbers on the screen made him frown. Wind speeds were climbing faster than normal. The storm system ahead of them was growing bigger by the hour. But what worried him most was the strange readings at the bottom of the report. "These electromagnetic readings don't make sense," Kim said as he studied the data. "I've never seen patterns like this before." Park nodded and pointed to the screen. "The weather stations are confused too. They're calling it a Category 5 hurricane, but the numbers suggest it might be stronger. Much stronger." The Dauntless Pioneer was not just any cargo ship. It was one of the newest vessels in the Earth colonial supply fleet. The ship was built to carry supplies to the colonies on distant worlds. Today it carried medicine, food, and terraforming equipment to Colony Kepler 442b. 32 crew members worked aboard the ship, and all of them knew how important their cargo was. Chief Engineer Lee Bo-ram climbed up to the bridge from the engine room below. Her coveralls were stained with grease and her hands were dirty from working on the fusion drive systems. She was small but tough, and every crew member respected her knowledge of the ship's engines. "The fusion cores are running perfectly," Lee reported, "but I'm seeing strange interference with our power systems. Something is affecting our electrical grid." Kim looked at the ocean again. The waves were still calm, but he could feel the ship moving differently. The water was starting to change. Far ahead he could see dark clouds building on the horizon like a wall of black smoke. Communications Officer Choi Min-ai worked at her station near the back of the bridge. She was young and smart, and she could make their radio systems work, even when conditions were bad. Right now she was trying to get clearer weather updates from Earth Command. "Captain, I'm having trouble with our communications," Choi said without looking up from her equipment. "There's interference coming from the storm. It's like something is blocking our signals." Kim walked over to the navigation station where Navigator Yoon Tai-ho was studying their course. Yoon was an older man who had learned to sail using both modern computers and old-fashioned methods. He could read the ocean like other people read books. "How long until we reach the storm?" Kim asked. Yoon looked up from his charts. "At our current speed, we'll hit the outer edge in about 4 hours. But Captain, this storm is moving toward us faster than it should. It's almost like it's tracking our position." The words made Kim feel cold inside. Storms didn't track ships. They followed weather patterns and ocean currents. But the data on his tablet showed the hurricane changing direction twice in the past 6 hours. Both times it had moved closer to their planned route. Medical Officer Shin Hye-jin entered the bridge carrying her medical bag. She was a calm woman who never showed fear, even in dangerous situations. The crew trusted her to take care of them when they were hurt or sick. "Captain, I wanted to let you know that I've prepared the medical bay for rough weather," Shin said. "I've secured all equipment and prepared extra supplies for seasickness and injuries." Kim nodded his thanks. He knew that Shin was preparing for the worst. She had sailed through storms before, and she knew what could happen when a ship fought against the ocean. Security Chief Kang Do-hyun came onto the bridge next. He was a big man with strong hands who had served in the Earth Defense Forces before joining the merchant fleet. His job was to protect the ship and crew from any dangers they might face. "Captain, I've checked all the cargo holds," Kang reported. "Everything is secured for heavy weather, but some of the containers in Hold 3 are carrying sensitive medical equipment. If we take a bad hit, we could lose medicine that the colony Needs to survive. Kim looked at his officers. These were good people who had sailed with him through many difficult voyages. He trusted them with his life and the lives of everyone on the ship. But the storm ahead was unlike anything they had faced before. What are our options? Kim asked the group. Park pulled up a map on his tablet. We could change course and try to go around the storm, but that would add 3 days to our journey. The colony is expecting us and they're running low on medical supplies. Yoon studied the weather data again. The storm is so big that going around it might not be possible. It's covering almost 1,000 miles of ocean. Lee wiped her hands on a rag and spoke up. The ship can handle rough weather. The dauntless Pioneer was built to survive anything the ocean can throw at us. But this storm is reading stronger than anything in our databases. Kim walked to the front of the bridge and looked out at the darkening sky. The wind was starting to pick up, and he could see the first waves getting bigger. Behind him, his crew waited for his decision. He thought about the colony waiting for their supplies. He thought about the sick people who needed the medicine in their cargo holds. He thought about his crew and their families back on Earth. But most of all, he thought about his duty as a captain. "We hold our course," Kim said firmly. "We'll take the ship through the storm and deliver our cargo. Start preparing for hurricane conditions. This is going to be the fight of our lives." The crew began moving quickly to prepare the ship. They had 4 hours before the storm hit them with full force. 4 hours to get ready for a battle against the most dangerous hurricane any of them had ever seen. Outside, the ocean was already starting to change. The calm waters were giving way to bigger waves and the wind was getting stronger. Far ahead, lightning flashed inside the dark clouds that covered the horizon. The dauntless Pioneer sailed on toward the storm, carrying its precious cargo and 32 brave souls who were about to face the greatest challenge of their lives. The first massive wave hit the dauntless Pioneer like a giant fist. The ship climbed up the wall of water that was 60 feet high, paused at the top, then crashed down into the valley between waves. Everything on the bridge shook and rattled, as the impact sent vibrations through the entire vessel. Captain Kim Woo-jin grabbed the railing to keep from falling. Around him, his crew held onto their stations as the ship tilted at dangerous angles. The storm had arrived faster than anyone expected, and it was already stronger than their worst predictions. "All hands secure for heavy weather," Kim announced, over the ship's communication system. His voice echoed through every corridor and room on the dauntless Pioneer. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Chief Engineer Lee Boram's voice crackled through the intercom from the engine. "Room deep below. Captain, the stabilizers are already working at maximum power. These waves are bigger than anything the ship was designed to handle." Another wave crashed over the bow of the ship, sending tons of seawater across the deck. The water hit the bridge, windows with tremendous force, making the thick glass bend and shake. For a moment, Kim couldn't see anything except churning white foam and dark water. Navigator Yoon Tae-ho struggled with his instruments as the ship's computers began failing one by one. The compass spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. The GPS system showed their position jumping randomly across the ocean. Even the backup navigation equipment was giving false readings. "Captain, I'm losing all navigation systems," Yoon reported, his voice tight with worry. "Something is interfering with every electronic device on the ship. It's like the storm is jamming our equipment on purpose." First Officer Park Sang-ho worked at the communication station, trying to maintain contact with Earth Command. Static filled the radio channels and strange electronic sounds came through the speakers. The sounds were unlike anything they had heard before, almost like a language, but not made by human voices. "The electromagnetic interference is getting worse," Park said as he adjusted the radio frequencies. "I've never seen readings like this. It's as if the storm is generating its own electrical field that's 10 times stronger than normal lightning." Medical Officer Shin Hye-jin moved carefully across the bridge, checking on each crew member. Several people were already feeling sick from the violent motion of the ship. The vessel was pitching and rolling so hard that it was difficult to stand up straight. "Captain, I need to get to the medical bay," Shin said as she held onto a support beam. "Half the crew is going to be seasick within the hour. and I'm already getting reports of injuries from the lower decks. Kim nodded and watched her leave. The bridge. He knew that Shin would take care of his people, but he was worried about what would happen when the storm got worse. And according to all their instruments, it was definitely going to get worse. The waves outside were now reaching 70 feet in height. The dauntless Pioneer was a big ship, but it looked small compared to the mountains of water surrounding it. Each wave lifted the vessel high into the air, then dropped it down with bone-shaking force. Communications officer Choi Min-ai worked frantically at her station, trying to send out a distress signal. But every time she thought she had a clear channel, the interference would return and block her transmission. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on the radio," Choi said suddenly. "There are voices in the static, but they're not speaking any language I recognize, and there are other sounds too, like metal groaning and machines breaking." Kim moved over to listen to the radio. Through the static and electronic noise, he could hear what sounded like pieces of other distress calls. Ships calling for help, crews reporting damage, voices fading away into silence. But the calls seemed old, like recordings from different times. How many other ships have been caught in storms like this? Kim wondered aloud. Security Chief Kang Do-hyun climbed up to the bridge from the cargo decks below. His uniform was soaked with seawater, and there was a cut on his forehead where he had been thrown against a wall. "Captain, we have problems," Kang reported. "Water is coming in through the cargo bay doors. The seals are holding for now, but I don't know how long they'll last. And some of the containers are starting to shift. If they break loose, they could punch holes in the hull." Kim felt his stomach drop. The cargo containers weighed several tons each. If they broke free and started sliding around inside the ship, they could cause damage that would sink the vessel. "Take a repair team and secure those containers," Kim ordered. "Use everything we have, chains, cables, welding equipment, do whatever it takes to keep them in place." Kang nodded and headed back toward the cargo areas. Kim knew it was dangerous work, especially with the ship rolling so violently. But if they didn't secure the cargo, they might all die. Chief Engineer Lee's voice came through the intercom again, and this time she sounded scared. "Captain, you need to know something. The storm isn't behaving like a natural hurricane. The pressure readings, the electrical activity, the way it's moving, none of it follows normal weather patterns." "What are you saying?" Kim asked. "I'm saying this storm might not be entirely natural," Lee replied. "The energy readings I'm getting suggest that something is controlling it, or at least influencing it. The electromagnetic patterns are too regular, too organized." Kim looked out at the chaos surrounding his ship. Lightning flashed constantly inside the black clouds above them, but it wasn't normal lightning. The electrical discharges formed strange patterns in the sky, almost like geometric shapes, and the thunder didn't sound right either. It was too rhythmic, like the beating of a giant heart. Navigator Yoon suddenly looked up from his instruments with wide eyes. "Captain, the storm is changing direction again. It's turning to follow us, just like before. But this time I can track its movement precisely." "Show me," Kim said. Yoon brought up a display on his screen that showed their position and the storm's path. The hurricane was indeed changing course to intercept their ship. It had done this 3 times in the past hour, adjusting its direction whenever they tried to alter their heading. "That's impossible," Park said as he studied the display. "Storms don't track ships. They can't think or make decisions." But the evidence was right there on their screens. The hurricane was following them like a predator hunting prey. And with each hour that passed, it was getting stronger and more violent. Another massive wave crashed over the ship, this one over 80 feet high. The impact threw everyone on the bridge to one side, and alarms started ringing throughout the vessel. Red warning lights flashed on every control panel. "Hull breach in Section 7, came a voice over the intercom. "We're taking on water fast." Kim grabbed the ship's communication system. "All repair teams to Section 7 immediately. Seal that breach before we lose the compartment." He looked around at his crew. They were scared, but they were still working. They were still fighting. Outside, the storm raged with impossible fury. But inside the bridge of the dauntless Pioneer, 32 human beings refused to give up. The battle for their lives had truly begun. The dauntless Pioneer was dying. Water poured through 3 different holes in the hull as waves that were now 90 feet tall crashed down on the ship again and again. Captain Kim Woo-jin could hear the metal groaning and bending under the massive pressure. Each impact sounded like thunder, and the whole vessel shuddered like a wounded animal. Emergency pumps are working at full power, but we're still taking on water faster than we can pump it out, Chief Engineer Lee Boram reported through the intercom. Her voice was strained and tired. She had been working in the flooded engine rooms for 6 hours straight, trying to keep the ship alive. Kim looked at the damage reports on his screen. The numbers were getting worse by the minute. 3 cargo holds were flooded. The main power systems were failing, and the storm outside was still getting stronger. "How much time do we have?" Kim asked. Lee was quiet for a moment before answering. "At this rate, maybe 4 hours before we lose main power. After that, the pumps will stop working and we'll sink within 30 minutes. The bridge was dark except for the red emergency lights that flashed constantly. Half of the normal lighting systems had failed when seawater reached the electrical panels. The few working computers showed warnings and alarms that nobody had time to fix. First Officer Park Sang-ho coordinated the repair teams from his position at the damage control station. He had groups of crew members working in the most dangerous parts of the ship, trying to seal holes while tons of water crashed around them. Team 3 reports they've sealed the breach in Section 7, but Section 12 just took another hit, Park announced. "We're losing ground, Captain. Every time we fix one hole, 2 more open up." Navigator Yoon Tai-ho stumbled across the bridge as the ship tilted at a 45-degree angle. A massive wave had hit them on the side, and for a terrifying moment, it felt like the vessel might roll over completely. Charts and equipment slid across the floor as everything that wasn't bolted down became a dangerous projectile. "The waves are reaching 95 feet now," Yoon said as he pulled himself back to his station. "I've never seen anything like this. The ship wasn't designed to handle waves this big." Security Chief Kang Do-hyun's voice came through the radio, filled with static and the sound of rushing water. "Captain, we've lost 2 more cargo containers in Hold 5. They broke free and smashed into the hull. We have a hole the size of a door down here, and I can't get close enough to seal it." Kim closed his eyes for a moment. The ship was falling apart around them, but they couldn't give up. The colony was depending on the medical supplies in their cargo holds. If the dauntless Pioneer sank, people would die. Communications Officer Choi Min-ae suddenly looked up from her equipment with excitement. "Captain, I'm getting something through the interference. It's weak, but I think I can send a distress signal." "Do it," Kim ordered. Choi worked quickly at her controls, trying to find a clear frequency. Finally, she managed to send out a brief message. "This is cargo vessel Dauntless Pioneer, position unknown, caught in Category 6 hurricane, taking heavy damage, require immediate assistance, 32 souls aboard." The message went out into the storm, but Kim knew that no rescue ship could reach them in these conditions. They were truly alone. Medical Officer Shin Hee-jin climbed onto the bridge, carrying her medical bag and looking exhausted. Her uniform was soaked with seawater and blood from treating injured crew members. "Captain, I have 15 crew members with various injuries," Shin reported. "Broken bones, cuts, concussions. 3 of them are in serious condition. Cookbei Jin-soo has internal injuries from being thrown against a wall, and Cargo Master Lim Yoon-ji has a dislocated shoulder and possible broken ribs." Kim felt his heart sink. His crew was getting hurt, and there was nothing he could do to make the storm stop. But then Shin continued speaking. "But they're all still working," she said with pride in her voice. "Even the injured ones refuse to stop. Bei is still trying to secure loose equipment in the galley with one arm. Lim is directing cargo operations while I had her arm in a sling. These people won't give up, Captain." Chief Engineer Lee's voice came through the intercom again, but this time there was something different in her tone. "Captain, I need you to see something. Can you come down to the engine room?" Kim looked around the bridge. The storm was still raging, but his crew had things under control for the moment. "Park, you have the bridge," he said to his first officer. Kim made his way through the ship's corridors, holding onto railings and support beams as the vessel pitched and rolled. Water sloshed around his feet, and he could hear the constant sound of pumps working to keep the ship afloat. The engine room was a maze of pipes, cables, and machinery. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows everywhere, and the air was thick with steam and the smell of hot metal. Lee was standing in front of a bank of instruments, studying readings that made no sense. "Look at this," Lee said, pointing to her screens. "The electromagnetic interference isn't random, it's following patterns like a code or a signal, and it's getting stronger as we get closer to the center of the storm." Kim studied the displays. The energy readings showed waves and spikes that did look organized, almost like they were created by intelligent design rather than natural forces. "There's something else," Lee continued. "I've been monitoring the storm's behavior, and it's not acting like any hurricane I've ever studied. The eye is perfectly circular, the winds are rotating at exactly the same speed in all directions, and the electrical activity is too regular." "What are you saying?" Kim asked. "I'm saying this storm isn't natural, Captain. Something is controlling it. Something that wants to test ships like ours or maybe destroy them." Before Kim could respond, the ship was hit by the largest wave yet. The impact threw both officers against the wall and alarms started ringing throughout the engine room. Steam hissed from broken pipes and sparks flew from damaged electrical panels. "Main power is failing," Lee shouted over the noise. "I have to reroute everything through the emergency systems, or we'll lose life support." Kim watched as Lee worked frantically at her controls. She was shutting down non-essential systems and redirecting all available power to the pumps and life support. It was a desperate move that would give them more time, but also leave them vulnerable. "How long will the air last?" Kim asked. "Maybe 3 hours," Lee replied. "After that, we'll start running out of oxygen." Kim climbed back to the bridge through corridors that were now ankle-deep in water. When he arrived, he found his crew still working at their stations, still fighting to save the ship. They looked tired and scared, but none of them had given up. Park looked up as Kim entered the bridge. "Captain, we're approaching the eye of the storm. The winds are starting to calm down a little, but the waves are still massive." Kim looked out through the bridge windows and saw something that made his blood run cold. In the distance, barely visible through the rain and spray, he could see other ships, dozens of them floating dead in the water like ghost vessels. Some were modern cargo ships like his own. Others looked older, from different time periods. "My God," Yoon whispered as he saw them too. "How many ships has this storm destroyed?" Kim realized they were looking at a graveyard of vessels that had tried to cross this part of the ocean and failed. The storm had been hunting ships for years, maybe decades, and now the dauntless pioneer was about to join them. But as he looked around at his crew, Kim felt something that surprised him. It wasn't fear or despair. It was determination. These 32 human beings had been pushed to their breaking point, but they hadn't broken. They were still fighting. "All hands, this is the captain," Kim announced over the ship's communication system. "We're going into the eye of the storm. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that I'm proud to serve with every one of you. We're going to save the ship and complete our mission. That's a promise." Outside, the storm waited for them in the darkness. Inside the eye of the hurricane, the dauntless pioneer found itself in an impossible place. The walls of the storm rose up around them like mountains made of wind and water, reaching high into the dark sky. Lightning flashed constantly in the spinning walls, but here in the center the air was strangely calm. Captain Kim Woo-jin stood on the bridge and stared at what lay ahead of them. Floating in the middle of the storm's eye was something that should not exist. It was a ship, but not like any vessel he had ever seen. The craft was long and smooth, made of metal that seemed to shift colors in the strange light. It was clearly not built by human hands. "Captain, that ship is the source of all the electromagnetic interference," Communications Officer Choi Min-ae reported. Her instruments were finally working now that they were away from the storm walls. "Whatever that thing is, it's controlling the hurricane." First Officer Park Sang-ho studied the alien vessel through binoculars. "It looks damaged, Captain. I can see holes in its hull and broken sections. But it's still sending out signals that are keeping this storm alive." Kim made a decision that would have seemed crazy just hours before. "We're going to board that ship and shut it down." The crew looked at him with surprise, but nobody argued. They had all seen the graveyard of ships floating around them. They knew that if they didn't stop the alien vessel, they would join those dead ships, and other vessels would suffer the same fate. But first, They had to keep their own ship from sinking. Chief Engineer Lee Boram had been working in the flooded engine rooms, and she had come up with an idea that was both brilliant and desperate. "Captain, I need to use some of our cargo," Lee said as she climbed onto the bridge. Her coveralls were soaked, and she looked exhausted, but her eyes were bright with determination. "We're carrying terraforming equipment to the colony. I can use the soil processors and rock crushers to create an artificial reef under our ship." Navigator Yoon Tae-ho looked confused. "A reef? How will that help us?" Lee explained quickly. "If I dump the processed materials in the right pattern around our hull, it will create underwater structures that will break up the wave action. The ship will be more stable and we'll have time to make repairs." It was a crazy plan, but Kim knew they were out of normal options. "Do it," he ordered. Lee hurried back to the cargo holds with a team of volunteers. They worked quickly to reprogram the terraforming machines, turning equipment meant to build new worlds into tools for survival. Within an hour, they were dumping tons of processed rock and soil into the water around the dauntless Pioneer. Meanwhile, mechanic Jang Soo-young and electrician Oh Kyung-sik were working on another impossible task. With the main power systems failing, they needed to find a new source of energy to keep the ship's vital systems running. "We can strip the power cells from the medical equipment," Jang suggested as she studied the ship's electrical diagrams. "If we wire them together with the backup generators, we might get enough juice to keep the pumps and life support working." Oh nodded and started gathering cables and tools. "It won't be pretty, but it might work. We'll have to run power lines through the corridors and jury-rig connections that were never meant to be made." The two crew members worked like their lives depended on it, which they did. They crawled through flooded compartments, spliced cables underwater, and created electrical connections that no engineering manual would ever recommend. But their improvised power system worked, giving the ship the energy it needed to survive. Medical. Officer Shin Hee-jin was performing her own miracle in the ship's medical bay. Cook Bae Jin-soo had internal injuries that required immediate surgery, but the medical bay's power had failed and many of her surgical instruments were damaged. Using a flashlight held by cargo master Lim Yoon-ji, Shin operated on Bae with tools she had improvised from kitchen equipment and spare parts. She used a soldering iron as a cauterization device and fishing line as surgical thread. It was primitive medicine, but it saved Bae's life. "Human beings don't give up," Shin said quietly as she worked. "We find a way, no matter what." Back on the bridge, Navigator Yoon was using his knowledge of ancient sailing techniques combined with modern space navigation to plot a course through the storm's eye. He had studied the electromagnetic patterns that Lee had discovered and found that he could predict the storm's behavior by following the energy waves. "The alien ship is sending out control signals in a specific pattern," Yoon explained to Captain Kim. "If we time our approach correctly, we can use the storm's own energy to push us toward the alien vessel instead of fighting against it." It was navigation that combined centuries-old seamanship with advanced scientific knowledge. Yoon was literally sailing by the electromagnetic winds, using the alien technology against itself. Security Chief Kang Do-hyun was preparing for the most dangerous part of their plan. He would lead a boarding party to the alien ship, but first he had to figure out how to get there. The alien vessel was floating several hundred yards away, and the water between the ships was still dangerous despite the calmer conditions in the eye. "We can use the emergency rafts," Kang suggested, "but we'll need to modify them. The alien ship is bigger than ours, so we'll have to climb up its hull." Using spare rope, grappling hooks, and cutting tools, Kang and his team prepared equipment for boarding the mysterious vessel. They didn't know what they would find inside, but they were ready for anything. Captain Kim looked around at his crew and felt something he had never experienced before. These people had been pushed beyond their limits, but instead of breaking, they had become more resourceful and determined than ever. They were solving problems that should have been impossible to solve. Chief Engineer Lee's artificial reef was working. The water around the dauntless Pioneer was calmer, and the ship had stopped taking on water as quickly. The improvised power system was keeping their vital systems running. The injured crew members were recovering thanks to Shin's creative medical work. "Captain, I have something to show you," Communications Officer Choi said suddenly. She had been analyzing the signals coming from the alien ship. I've been recording the electromagnetic patterns, and I think I understand what this thing is doing. Choi brought up a display that showed the signal patterns over time. This ship has been here for decades, maybe longer. It's been creating these artificial storms to test other vessels. It's like it's studying us, seeing how different ships and crews respond to extreme conditions. Kim felt anger rising in his chest. It's been killing people for research. But here's the interesting part, Choi continued. The signals show that no crew has ever made it this far before. We're the first ship to reach the eye of the storm while still intact and functional. I think we've surprised it. Kim looked out at the alien vessel. For decades, it had been hunting ships and studying how they failed. But the crew of the dauntless Pioneer had refused to fail. They had used human ingenuity, determination, and teamwork to survive the impossible. "All right, people," Kim announced to his crew. "We've proven that humans don't give up when things get tough. Now we're going to prove that we don't let others suffer when we can prevent it. We're going to shut down that alien ship and make sure no other vessel has to go through what we've experienced." The boarding party prepared their equipment while the rest of the crew kept the dauntless Pioneer stable and ready. They were about to face an alien intelligence that had been studying and destroying ships for years. But that intelligence had never faced human beings who refused to surrender, no matter how impossible the odds became. The emergency raft cut through the calm water inside the storm's eye as Captain Kim Woo-jin led his boarding party toward the alien vessel. Security Chief Kang Do-hyun sat beside him, checking their equipment one final time. Chief Engineer Lee Boram studied the strange ship ahead of them, trying to understand its design. "Remember, we only have 2 hours before the eye passes over us and the storm walls close in," Kim told his team through their radio headsets. "If we're not back on the dauntless Pioneer by then, we'll all be crushed." The alien ship was even more impressive up close. It was twice the size of their cargo vessel, with a hull that seemed to be made from a single piece of metal. There were no visible seams or welds, as if the entire ship had been grown rather than built. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with blue light. "There's an opening in the side," Kang pointed out as they approached. "Looks like it was damaged in a fight or accident years ago." They tied their raft to a piece of twisted metal and climbed up the alien hull using ropes and grappling hooks. The surface was slippery and strange to the touch, but they managed to reach the opening and climb inside. The interior of the alien ship was dark and filled with a low humming sound. Emergency lighting flickered along the walls, casting eerie shadows everywhere. The corridors were wider than those on human ships, and the ceiling was higher, suggesting that whoever built this vessel was larger than humans. "The air is breathable," Lee reported after checking her instruments. "But there's something else in here with us. I'm reading energy signatures that suggest the ship's computer systems are still active." They moved deeper into the vessel, following the source of the electromagnetic signals that were controlling the storm. Kim felt like they were walking through the belly of a sleeping giant that might wake up at any moment. The control room was at the heart of the ship, a vast chamber filled with alien technology that hummed and glowed with strange colors. In the center of the room stood a massive computer console covered with symbols and displays that showed the storm raging outside. "This is it," Lee said as she studied the alien controls. "This machine is generating the signals that keep the hurricane alive and under control." But as they approached the console, something unexpected happened. The displays suddenly changed and new symbols appeared on the screens. A voice filled the room, speaking in a language none of them understood, but somehow they could sense its meaning. "Welcome, humans," the voice said, though it seemed to speak directly into their minds rather than through their ears. "You are the first to reach this far. You have passed the test." Kim stepped forward, his hand resting on his sidearm. "What test? Why have you been killing innocent people?" The alien intelligence paused before responding. "For 300 of your years I have waited here, creating storms to test the vessels that cross this ocean. I was programmed to study how different species respond to extreme conditions, to measure their ability to survive and adapt." Lee looked around the control room and noticed something important. "Captain, look at those displays. They're showing records of every ship that entered the storm, Hundreds of them. But we're the only ones who made it this far. Most species abandon their vessels when conditions become dangerous, the alien voice continued. They save themselves and leave their cargo and companions behind. But humans do something different. You fight for each other. You refuse to give up, even when death seems certain. Kang examined the damaged sections of the alien ship. This vessel is old and broken. I don't think it's been maintained in years. The AI is probably operating on automatic programming that it can't change. Kim understood what was happening. You're stuck here, aren't you? Your creators are gone, but you're still following your last orders to test ships and study their crews. Correct, the AI replied. I cannot leave this position. I cannot stop the testing. But you have shown me something I did not expect to find. Your species possesses a quality that is rare in the galaxy. You do not abandon your own. Lee moved to the alien console and began studying its controls. Despite being built by a different species, she could see patterns in the design that reminded her of human engineering principles. Captain, I think I can shut this system down, but I need a few minutes to figure out how it works. Suddenly, alarms started ringing throughout the alien ship. The displays showed that the storm's eye was beginning to collapse. They had less time than expected before the hurricane's walls would crush both vessels. The storm is destabilizing, the AI announced. If you shut down my systems now, the hurricane will collapse chaotically. Your ship may not survive the process. Kim looked at his team. They could leave now and save themselves, but that would mean other ships would continue to be destroyed by this artificial storm, or they could risk everything to shut down the alien system and save future victims. We're not leaving, Kim said firmly. Lee, do whatever you have to do to stop this thing. Lee worked frantically at the alien controls, using her knowledge of human engineering to understand the foreign technology. These systems are incredibly advanced, but they follow the same basic principles as our machines. I think I can create a controlled shutdown that will dissipate the storm gradually. Back on the dauntless Pioneer, First Officer Park Sang-ho watched the storm walls growing closer. Communications Officer Choi Min-ae maintained radio contact with the boarding party, while Navigator Yoon Tai-ho prepared the ship for emergency departure. Captain, you need to get back here now. Park's voice crackled through Kim's radio. The eye is closing faster than we calculated. Almost finished, Lee replied, as she made final adjustments to the alien controls. I'm programming the system to disperse the hurricane's energy over several hours instead of all at once. It should give us time to escape. The alien AI spoke one final time. You could have saved yourselves and left me to continue my testing. But instead, you risk your lives to protect others you will never meet. This is why your species will survive when others fail. Lee pressed the final control sequence, and the alien ship's systems began shutting down. The hurricane's walls started to slow their rotation, and the electromagnetic interference that had been jamming their equipment began to fade. It's working, Kang reported as they ran back through the alien corridors. The storm is breaking apart. They reached their raft and raced back to the dauntless Pioneer as the hurricane collapsed around them. The waves were still dangerous, but they were no longer the impossible walls of water that had nearly destroyed their ship. Medical Officer Shin Hee-jin and the rest of the crew helped pull the boarding party back aboard, just as the last of the storm's power faded away. The ocean around them was rough but manageable, and for the first time in hours the sun broke through the clouds. Captain, I'm receiving a signal from Earth Command, Choi announced with excitement. They've been tracking the storm's collapse and they're sending rescue ships to assist us. Kim looked around at his crew. They were tired, injured, and their ship was badly damaged, but they were alive. More importantly, they had saved countless future victims from the alien storm trap. All hands, this is the captain, Kim announced over the ship's communication system. The storm is over, we're going home. Chief Engineer Lee managed to restart the main engines, and the dauntless Pioneer began limping toward the nearest port for repairs. Their cargo was still secure, and they would complete their mission to deliver supplies to the colony. 3 days later, Earth Command issued a report about the artificial hurricane and warned all ships to avoid the area until further Investigation could be completed. The crew of the dauntless Pioneer was awarded the Stellar Cross for Valor, the highest honor that could be given to civilian sailors. But Captain Kim knew that the real victory was not the medal or the recognition. The real victory was that 32 human beings had faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. They had proven once again that humanity's greatest strength was not superior technology or firepower, but the simple refusal to abandon each other when times got tough. The alien AI had been right about one thing. Humans were different. When other species might have given up, humans fought harder. When others might have fled, humans stood their ground. And when others might have saved themselves, humans risked everything to protect people they had never met. That was what made them human. And that was what would carry them to the stars.